And welcome everybody to Sports Spot. Today we've got a host here from CTS interview room, Marvin. He kind of has a he's got a good interview channel. He brings in a lot of Alabama former players as well as some pretty good content. Marvin, talk about what you guys got as well as some of the things you do.
Well, one of the things we do is we make it a point to spotlight former athletes, and we talk about their careers, the things that they did while playing at Alabama, as well as in the NFL, and then we also touch on what they're doing in current day life. We kind of bring it full circle, just letting people see that athletes are more than just athletes because nobody plays forever. At some point, it has to end. How do you transition into the next phase of your life? So we spotlight all that. We also talk a lot about my book, Physical and Mental Fitness at 40 Plus. It's a book that I actually wrote for anybody who's looking to get back in shape or in shape and looking for a different challenge. It has different workout plans in there for different skill levels. And you can find it on my website, 40plusstrong.com. That's 40plusstrong.com. And we also sell workout supplies and other things on there as well. So that's the bulk of it. We talk fitness and we talk football and we talk what's going on in current life.
Yep. Alrighty. So you ready to get into this?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, so obviously up first we've got the Clemson versus Ohio State game. Dabo Sweeney, he before the game he mentioned that he ranked Ohio State 11th in the country in his coach's poll, and he's still backing that up, even after the loss that they and the beating that they took. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously that was interesting in my opinion. Um, but again, it was big. Oh shoot, you're muted.
Yeah, Dabo, he's a good friend of mine. He was the receivers coach at Alabama when I played there. Actually, I know about half of his staff because I either played with him or I'm good friends with him. I think Dabo just bit off more than he could chew this time. That's
Yeah.
a good Ohio State team. We just hadn't seen their full body of work due to their limited schedule.
Yep.
I would never make it a point to go out and talk trash to a team, especially a team with that caliber of talent on it, because you don't know what you're going to get. So I think, he gave them too much bulletin board material and those guys ate it up and they went out there and they took it to him.
Yeah, especially I mean Justin Fields definitely flourished in that game in my opinion. Especially with like obviously taking the shot that he did. Although that was a debatable like ejection. Obviously it needed to be penalized because that's what they're trying to get rid of in the game. And obviously, you know, that he didn't need to duck his head, but I don't agree with the ejection call. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with the ejection charge. And being a former middle linebacker myself, that was a very dirty hit. You can't drop your head and launch and just dig into the guy's ribs like that. For me, that was more like you intentionally did that for the purpose of hurting him. And, like you said, that's one of the things that they're trying to take out of the game of football. They're trying to clean it up and make it a safer sport for everybody. So I completely agree with the ejection.
All right. Also, I the thing about the Sweeney thing, though, obviously Ohio State, they did have the loss last year in the devastating heartbreak fashion, and he did give them that extra firepower, to help them. Obviously, want to play harder. Obviously, want to win that game even more, and it's just something you can't really do because, like, when I look back, I'm not obviously I'm younger, and I look back at some of the older games, like it was like Washington versus Buffalo in one of the Super Bowls, and the Buffalo offensive line coach talked about the defensive line of Washington, and obviously that kind of backfired on them. And you can probably agree with me, or you can kind of attest to me about that as well.
Yeah, like I said, the last thing you want to do is give another coach or an opponent, bulletin board material to add fuel to the fire. Especially when you're talking playoffs and high stakes games. You got to stick to your routine. You got to keep it as normal as possible. Never give them anything to use against you, and that was the bulk of what he did.
I agree. I mean, again, I was looking at this and I'm like, this is going to probably come back to haunt them. Obviously, they're really good recruiting wise because obviously they're in the top four, My opinion is that I think the college football playoff needs to be expanded, and I think it should be either 18 or 16 teams. It looks it would be a better recruiting tool for most colleges.
I mean, it should definitely be an 18 playoff because with 4 teams, you're leaving a lot of contenders out. And, we've seen Alabama come from a 4th spot to win a championship before. So that's the last thing you want to do, is leave out somebody who could potentially win a championship based on the fact that they weren't in the top 4. So, I would definitely think that expanding it to 8 teams, I would take the conference champions from the major 5 conferences, and then I would take 3 at-larges and just fill that thing out and just do an 18 playoff and just be done with it.
I agree with this. And what was your thoughts on the way Trevor Lawrence, like the differences between Lawrence's and Fields' game? Obviously, I think that Trevor Lawrence is still obviously going to be more than likely the number 1 pick. But Fields kind of gave his push for being a non-number 1 overall. Like, he wants to be the number 1, obviously. And honestly, I think it's going to be a tough pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars to choose. Who do you think is going to come out as the number 1?
I mean, you got to ask yourself, what are you buying with this number 1 pick? You got to look at the quarterback from top to bottom. You got to look at all of their skill sets and the way the NFL game has been evolving. The one good thing that Lawrence did do is recently he's been showing his running ability a lot more. And that's what a lot of these teams are looking for. They're looking for more athletic quarterbacks who can run and throw. So I think it's going to be a toss-up.
Yeah, because
who the number 1 pick is. But I'm pretty sure it'll be Trevor.
I agree with that. Mainly because obviously – the league right now is moving away from that pocket quarterback stance of like Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, and so many more, like Peyton Manning or per se, to more of these like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and like more of those type of running back or quarterbacks, like or even Lamar Jackson being able to run the read option.
Correct. The game has evolved so much, and you have to think about it. When you look at it in terms of from a defensive player's perspective, looking at an offense, it looks like this. When you have a team who can spread the ball out, run 4 and 5 wide receivers, it puts you in a bad position because everybody's having to cover. So oftentimes, the defenders, the linebackers, the cornerbacks, the safeties have their backs turned to the quarterback because they're chasing receivers. So if you have a quarterback who can actually run the ball as well, it gives you an extra dynamic to add to your offense because you can easily have those guys run downfield and then run a late quarterback draw, and pick up massive amount of yards because everybody's covering people. So it plays a major role in how defensive coordinators game plan and scheme when you have a quarterback who can run and throw.
That's a good point because again, you look at this and you look at like what Russell Wilson does. He's obviously carrying a team with obviously his legs and his arm. Obviously, he doesn't have much for targets besides DK and maybe Lockett. Obviously, they're trying to help him out. And like Deshaun Watson, he can only do so much with his legs, but it also comes down to what pieces that those teams also have.
Correct. And, one of the things the Texans, getting rid of their best receiver, that was like the worst thing you could actually do to a quarterback. So, but when you put a quarterback in the right position with the right surrounding cast, you give them decent running backs and great receivers, and they're going to do amazing work.
I agree with this. But again, it's going to be a very interesting time come the draft, and it's going to be interesting for the next, also like the next 3 quarterbacks as well, because there's obviously multiple teams still needing quarterbacks in this league.
Correct.
And obviously wide receivers like
best drafted in the first round than normal. And you got a lot of guys. You got Mac Jones from Alabama, you got your Kyle Trask, you got the kid from BYU, you got the one kid from Wyoming. You got a lot of good quarterbacks coming out this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of them actually go into the first round. And we all know a team's needs dictates how that round goes. So you have to take that into account when deciding whether you're leaving school early or coming back. Because, again, you might be rated as the 2nd or the 3rd best pick on the board, but if a team doesn't need a quarterback, they have other needs, then that's what they're going to go with.
And I agree with that. That's where I think that, like, I'm going to talk about this a little bit early. Mac Jones, he's a junior, am I wrong?
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure Mac is out. I don't think Mac's coming back.
That's a good point. But it's going to be a very interesting time because I know, obviously, the Patriots definitely need a quarterback. I don't think Cam Newton returns.
Yeah, I don't see Cam returning at all. You know, Cam has had a lackluster year. Cam has done nothing to help himself moving forward. His play this year, I think, has been very detrimental to his stock overall. So I definitely see the Patriots drafting a quarterback because the reports on Stidham have not been good. So they have to pick somebody to move forward with.
And I agree with that. I was saying earlier this month to saying that why not try to start Stidham and see actually what you've got in live play, in live action, and it would help you make the decision, oh, do we need to draft this quarterback or not?
Yeah, I don't think that they trusted him much.
And I agree with that. But moving into this next point here, we're going to be talking about the Alabama versus Notre Dame game. And in my opinion, Notre Dame didn't deserve to be there.
Not at all. They beat a Clemson team with the backup quarterback. So, can you really count that them? But that's what we all knew was going to happen anyway. So, but I think it's more of a poor reflection on the ACC as a whole and the fact of the lack of talent and depth in the ACC. It's not what people make it out to be. You look at the two teams that they take from the ACC and put in the playoff this year, and they both get killed. So, how do you justify that when both of them get killed?
Yeah, exactly. And it also doesn't help that Clemson even lost to Notre Dame lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game, like a couple weeks prior. And to me, that was like, you're kidding me, right? There's is it like Texas Tech that was number 5 if I remember right. I can't remember who was
Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas A&M. They were number 5, and I felt like they probably had a better shot. Obviously, they probably would have also gotten killed, but they probably had a little bit of a shot or deserving to be in that and it'd been an interesting playoff.
Right. Anybody but Notre Dame. Notre Dame's terrible, man. Oh God. From the moment that matchup was announced, we knew it would not be good.
Yeah, if I was, obviously, I'm not quite old enough to bet yet, but if I was old enough to bet on that, I would have probably put money down on Bama probably breaking that spread as they did.
Yeah, but we got to do better defensively. Our defensive coordinator Pete Golding, he is terrible. I'm sorry, the guy's terrible. He has to go. Alabama's defense for years has been the staple of the team. Even when I played at Alabama, we had number 2 defense in the country. That has been the staple of Alabama's defense forever. We're not used to seeing this level of points being put up, so it's definitely an adjustment, one that we're not happy about.
And it was like, I think if I remember right, it was like 31-14 final. And that was right. And I was like, obviously, I was saying that if Notre Dame went down by 21, this game was over.
Right.
And I felt like Alabama's defense obviously was going to be way stronger than Notre Dame's offense. And it showed. Obviously, the Notre Dame's defense failed to cover Alabama's tight ends and wide receivers.
Correct. It was a matchup nightmare. Notre Dame don't have the personnel to match up with that level of talent. And, Clemson showed them that when Trevor Lawrence was healthy. They didn't have the personnel to line up with them either. So we'll see how they regroup and respond. But hopefully, they'll get it right next year.
I agree with that. And obviously, you coming from the Alabama football program, you would probably agree with me saying that Saban was showing why he's still possibly the greatest coach of this era of collegiate football.
Yeah. Yeah, and he really did. And the thing about it, he took his foot off the gas against Notre Dame. We could have scored a lot more points.
I agree with that. They just probably didn't want to embarrass them too much. And
right.
Obviously, there were some bad quarterback plays by Ian Book, the Notre Dame quarterback, and there was an interception that was late in the game, and obviously the ball should not have been thrown in that area.
Right. Yeah. Oh God. It happens, but what can you do?
Yeah. And I was also thinking while watching this game, I was thinking Mac Jones could be the third or fourth best quarterback in this draft. And it's close between him and the BYU quarterback, Zach Wilson.
Correct. But the thing about it, most people are going to say that Mac has more weapons than the guy from BYU. That's why his numbers are better. So, you got to go back to the fundamentals. Look at the quarterback progressions. Look at how he reads the defense, how he reads the field, how fast he gets the ball out, how well he manages games, does he make bad decisions in
Yep.
crucial situations. So, those are all factors that they're going to have to consider when determining which one of those guys is going to come off the board first.
And I agree with that. It's also going to come down to also looking how much of a project, like say, obviously Green Bay, for example, drafted Jordan Love, even though Aaron Rodgers has like 4 years left on his contract. It's a project as well. If you're drafting a guy, say, like Mac Jones, or like maybe even Trevor Lawrence could be a project for a team.
Right. But whoever the number one pick is going to Jacksonville, they're going to play soon. It's not going to be a
Yeah,
project.
no. And obviously Jackson, there's also been a lot, there's also the amount of busts that have also come from number one. And that's the one thing Jacksonville is also probably considering, especially after looking at like some other first round quarterbacks, like obviously the most recent Dwayne Haskins.
Right. But not all first round quarterbacks were bad. You got to look at Herbert out with the Chargers.
Exactly.
Look at Tua with Miami. Then you look at Burrow, what he was doing before he got hurt. So there's been a lot of very promising young quarterbacks early on. But two, you got to look at the adaptation of the game. More NFL teams are moving to more spread offenses, more college-related theory behind their plays, which makes these guys more comfortable. Whereas before it used to be you play one way in college, you play another way in the NFL. So the NFL has been smart in the fact that they've been tailoring their game more to these quarterbacks' needs to make them more successful sooner.
Yeah, you see that with like Lamar, and you see that obviously with Herbert. Obviously Herbert, obviously is going to be
Lamar,
getting in.
Herbert, Kyler
Yeah,
Murray. You see it
yeah,
with all of them. A smart coach is gonna a smart coach is gonna tailor his scheme to the players he has. You can have the best defensive scheme or offensive scheme in the world. If you don't have the players to run it, then it won't work. You have to run what your players are best at.
and I agree with that. Now we're going to talk about the Heisman winner, Alabama wide receiver Devontae Smith. Obviously, he showed out in that playoff game, and he's been showing out all season. Obviously, being shown as the Heisman winner, and obviously, you've probably watched a lot more of the Alabama games than I have because of the area I live in. And so, what can you really tell about him playing the way he was?
Devontae has been playing amazing football since he was a freshman at Alabama. You go back to the 2017 National Championship game against Georgia, the whole second and 26 play. That was Devontae, catching that touchdown as well. Over the years, he's had so many amazing catches and so many 200-yard games, multiple 3, 4, 5 touchdown games. I mean, he's done any and everything that you could ask a player to do, and he's done it all with class and respect.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he was also, from what I was at work when he made a speech, but I kind of saw snippets, and he was very humble of obviously winning that. And obviously, a lot of people were saying that Mac Jones and Smith were gonna like take votes away from each other.
Nah, Devontae, again, he's done something that most players could never do, and he's had an amazing year. So, you just, I'm happy for the guy, and I'll see him the next time I'm in Tuscaloosa, and I'll thank him personally and tell but he's the most deserving of that award. Great kid, great career. Again, he's done everything that everyone's asked of him, and he's done it with class and respect.
I can tell as well, like especially because I was also hearing that he doesn't really trash talk, and that's one thing I really respect. Obviously, there's a lot of wide receivers in college and in the NFL that talk trash, and obviously that's a part of the game. But for a wide receiver not to do that, it shows that he's a grown man instead of a 20-year-old kid playing.
Correct. And again, it's a testament to his character and how he was raised by his parents to be respectful at all times, even while kicking your butt. He's going to be respectful. What more can you ask for a kid?
Exactly. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about here the Bama and Ohio State national championship game. Obviously, I'm taking Bama. I'm a Big Ten kid, but I still take Bama. I know Ohio State's probably still fuming, but I still think Alabama. Obviously, they watch film. Obviously, they're going to watch and kind of correct what they did on defense from what you were saying. That your opinion, it wasn't very good defense. And obviously, I think Bama fixes their issues and obviously comes out and beats Ohio State.
Well, we'll see how it turns out. The key to victory in this game, the determining factor is going to be Ohio State's head coach and offensive coordinator Ryan Day versus Alabama's defensive coordinator Pete Golding. Pete is going to have to step up his game to match wits with Ryan Day. If he doesn't, it's going to be a long day for Alabama. That is going to be the key to the Tide pulling out the victory. Can Pete step up to the plate and match wits with Ryan Day? So that's going to be the key to victory, hands down.
That's a good point because, again, you also have to think the coaches are trying to outcoach each other. And, like, you could look back, and I think it was the Chargers. Yeah, it was the Chargers-Patriots game a couple weeks ago where Bill Belichick beat the Chargers 34-0. As was one of the worst, I think it was, the first time in, multiple years that the Chargers had been beaten that bad. And, obviously, Bill Belichick outcoached Anthony Lynn.
Right.
And so,
coaching plays a major role in it. So we'll see how it goes. My beloved Tide, I'm 100% sure we'll get the victory, but how close will the game be? That's going to be the question.
Correct. And obviously, you've probably heard of the rumors of the game being postponed due to Ohio State having COVID concerns. And a lot of people are calling that out. From what I heard,
regardless, it's just like having somebody out with an ankle sprain or a knee injury. It's the same thing. Do what you got to do. Next man up, play the game.
Exactly. That's what I was just saying. I was like, a lot of people are calling them out saying, oh, but they have a quarterback that just, got hurt, obviously they might be faking it, but obviously you can't really tell, obviously, because there's not many people entering the Ohio State buildings currently.
Right. So, regardless of whatever their reasoning is behind it, you can't, the game is going to be played on Monday. So.
Exactly. Now moving forward here, we're going to talk about a little bit about the NFL here. First up, the Packers versus the Bears game. In my opinion, Rodgers kept proving why he's going to be the MVP of this year. He was 10 for 10.
He had a great game. What they did, that game should have been a lot worse. That was an early fumble that they should have put up more points in the first half in that game. So, yeah, I definitely think he's putting his name in the history books for another year.
Yep, and from what I was looking at some of the stats, the first half, Aaron Rodgers was 10 for 10 for 155 yards and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. And that's just something you need to look at as well because obviously he's got great chemistry with most of his receivers.
Right, correct. So.
I will say, obviously, Jones did have a slow start, carrying the ball 6 times with only 18 yards, but obviously, this game wasn't dependent on the run.
Right. I think they're going to do great in the playoffs, so I'm looking forward to seeing them, and I'm looking forward to this Baltimore game with the Titans. I think, Derrick Henry's going to give them all that they want and then some, so.
I agree with that, because obviously, Derrick Henry was a monster this year, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But again, Derrick Henry's a monster to stop. And a couple weeks ago, when I was making my ESPN has this playoff machine, as you know, and I was thinking Tennessee was going to beat Green Bay because Green Bay to me hadn't really proven to stop the run.
Yeah, but it's Aaron Rodgers. You can't bet against that guy.
That's a good point. But the defense also did step up very well again in that game. And actually showed that they're improving and actually learning to stop the run.
Right. Okay. Well, if you have any other questions for me, you might want to ask because I think I might have about a minute or two left on this thing before it dies.
Sounds good. Anything you want to pitch or anything you want to throw out to help with the show, with pitching your stuff?
You can find the CTS Interview Room on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find my book on 40plusstrong.com. That's 40plusstrong.com. Not only do we sell books, we also sell fitness equipment, gloves, weightlifting belts, straps, compression sleeves, anything you need for effective working out. So,
all right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And it was great getting to know kind of what your thoughts are coming from an Alabama football program, as well as obviously hosting multiple former Alabama players that have played in the NFL and in college.
Anytime. And if you want to talk again after this national championship game, you have my information. Feel free. Just let me know.
Will do. And thanks for coming on today.
Okay. Thank you. You have a good day.
You too. Well, that was Marvin from CTS Interview Room, and I'll continue about this Green Bay game. Obviously, the Bears defense couldn't stop much, and their offense stuttered most of that night. And it was a problem. It was a major problem for that team. To me, it's just in the playoffs. I don't think Chicago makes it out of the first round. Because, again, you look at this and you're like, damn, they're going to be in the playoffs? Because obviously Arizona lost, and it was not a good look. And to me, it was going to be the difference between them making it and them not making it. And obviously, they've got the Saints first round, and I'll talk about that in here in a little bit. But it was a difference maker, and obviously it's going to be an interesting thing. With the win, though, Green Bay clinched the first seed, and the playoffs go through Green Bay. And the Bears, as I said, make the playoffs even with due to the Cardinals loss to the Rams, and the Rams are in due to beating the Cardinals. And it was a very interesting season, and it'll be very interesting playoffs. And as Marvin was saying, you can't bet against Aaron Rodgers, especially when it's a cold, windy day in Lambeau Field, and it's going to be a very interesting season. Now, moving forward here, the Dallas versus New York game. To me, this was a big game. Obviously, both teams needing the win, and obviously a lot needing to happen for them to happen, and it just wasn't a very good look to them. To me, obviously, this was a poor game, a very poor game in my opinion, and it didn't really look very good. New York looked in the first half very strong. They looked like they wanted it than Dallas, and Dallas was struggling in the first half. They couldn't stop Daniel Jones throwing the ball. They couldn't stop the run. It was just a poor performance. But obviously, Dallas comes back in the second half. They have Andy Dalton at quarterback, and Dalton, he's looking for another shot, and so he's going to be playing his heart out. And obviously, still in playoff contention, you're going to be fighting for every yard, every play. And it was a very interesting time because you look at this, and you look at what happened. Dallas obviously started to come back, and again, it was a very interesting point. Dallas was moving forward. Dallas obviously made some really good halftime adjustments, and to me, New York didn't make much because they didn't see much. And obviously, New York came out on top of this game, but Mike McCarthy, what are you thinking? This play right here, this play that's going to be popping up on your screen here soon, really shows why Mike McCarthy was fired from the Green Bay Packers. This play should have been challenged. This is not a catch. And obviously it was a game-changing point because, again, you look at this and you're like, that's not a catch. He trapped the ball, and you can't trap the ball and it be a catch. It'll be ruled incomplete. Now, had Mike McCarthy challenged this, it would have been overturned. And obviously, Dallas probably could have won this game. And Mike McCarthy was also showing in the first half why he was fired from Green Bay. His play calling was too conservative. Way too conservative in that game. And in my opinion, it cost them. It cost them a lot of points, and it really showed. And in my opinion, that was the issue. And I'm watching Green Bay most of my life with Mike McCarthy as a head coach. I knew it was not going to be a good play at all. And again, I think it was a very interesting time because, again, you look at this and you just think, that's an incomplete pass. It was incomplete. And obviously, something needed to change, and it was very interesting. Coming up after this, we're going to talk about the Eagles-Washington football team game, as well as much more coming up right after this sponsor from our ad. How's it going, everybody? This is Christian from SportsBot. If you haven't heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can be heard on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make your money on your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Now, for me, it's what I'm using right now. It'll be very important for you to make a podcast, and again, it's free. Now, I'm using this upload anywhere you get your podcast, but Anchor has made me feel as though I'm important again, and has allowed me to get my voice out. And like I said, it's free, and I've enjoyed every second of it. Go download their free app or register on Anchor.fm. And thanks again for listening to this podcast, and let's get back to the show. And welcome back, everybody, to Sports Spot. Coming up, we got the Eagles game as well as much, much more coming up here. Obviously, we've got a lot of issues coming up here. Obviously, Eagles losing to Washington making the playoffs due to that, and we're going to talk about the playoff slate here in a little bit. But again, it's interesting. Jalen Hurts was benched in a game that could have decided another team's fate with the Giants. Obviously, the Giants beat the Cowboys. And obviously, this was a big game for this team. For that team. So they thought Philly was going to play strong. And the NFC East played strong the entire season. And it's very interesting. Now, Hurts benched, and Doug Peterson defended his decision to bench him and saying he was playing to win and Sudfeld deserved more snaps. That sentence doesn't make sense. Because if you're wanting to win, well, then you should, keep your starting quarterback in. Oh, but we had Darius Slay. We saw this guy in. That doesn't matter. You don't put the best players on the field at any given point in that game, be it on offense or defense. Jalen Hurts should have stayed in that game and probably could have won that game by all that matters. And obviously it did. And obviously, in my opinion, I think this was a mistake. And a lot of fans and players are very ticked off, and I don't blame them. And you play your best player. And obviously, it was very interesting because in this right here, Jalen Hurts is saying it's not right. It's not right, and he's not wrong. I think maybe, just maybe, that they changed what they did. They win this game. And again, in my opinion, it was a very close game. And in my opinion, it'll be interesting to see. Hurts was giving him the side eye, and so did the offensive line. The offensive line knew it was wrong. It was very wrong for them. And obviously it's going to be interesting to see what happens this offseason, especially with Carson Wentz possibly asking for a trade later on this year. The Washington defense played extra strong, I'm not going to lie. Chase Young and Sweat are going to be a monstrous defensive line in the playoffs. And I think give the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a run for their money. Bruce Arians actually did say that this is not a 7-9 team. This isn't the Dwayne Haskins they're facing. This is a 4-1 team with an Alex Smith. Washington's going to give the Buccaneers a run for their money. It's going to be a very interesting game, I think. That's one of those games I want to watch. And again, it'll be interesting to see. There's reports actually coming from Adam Schefter, ESPN's analyst, saying that the Wentz and Peterson's relationship is broken beyond repair, and Carson Wentz is still going to ask for a trade. I don't blame him at all. And it's going to be a very interesting topic because, again, he didn't really play much this season. If you're paying them all this money, why not use him? Why not try to use him as much as you can? In my opinion, that's what you need to do. And it was very saddening to see. Again, it's very interesting to see what happens with this. Now, again, I think there's going to be some big changes in this offseason with that team. And in my opinion, Doug Peterson could get fired because of this. Because of the backlash, because of what's happened. And obviously, I don't want to see that, but it's going to be very interesting to see because Doug Peterson doesn't deserve that job if that's what he does. Especially if you've benched your guy that you're paying the $45 million or whatever Carson Wentz is getting paid a year contract. And it's going to be hard to trade him. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be hard to trade Carson Wentz. But if you do it post June 1st, it's a $9 million dead cap, and the other team gets the money. It's going to be very hard for them to do it pre, because it's going to hurt your cap in the long run. And again, it'll be very interesting. I think Carson Wentz should go to the Colts. It's going to be what happens. And I just think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. Now, again, it's just going to be a very interesting time as well. I think something needs to happen. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of news happening with that team, being the Eagles. I think they go wide receiver in this draft. And I think they go probably defensive back. But they also have to have the free agency market. And obviously Carson Wentz isn't the guy. Obviously Doug Peterson's made the decision that Carson Wentz isn't the guy. But as Rex Ryan said on NFL Get Up or whatever, Wentz should try to stay and see what happens. He should try to compete for that job, to compete for that starting job. And I think it's going to be a very interesting time, because it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. In my opinion, it's going to be a very interesting thing to do, because again, I think it's going to be an interesting time for this team, as they've been struggling, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, Washington football team has figured something out with Alex Smith. Alex Smith has been the guy. Alex Smith has been the guy to win. And Alex Smith is 4-1 with this team, and this team is going to be a dominant force in the playoffs. That defense is strong, and then that offense is finally picking up the pieces. Now that there's no more distractions with Dwayne Haskins and Ron Rivera being with cancer, it's going to be a very interesting time. Obviously, it'll be an interesting thing. As I said last week, it's going to be interesting. We've also got coaches going on here. And I think Ron Rivera picked up and knew what Alex Smith could still do. Obviously, Alex Smith, as I've talked about a lot, in 9 months had 17 surgeries. And his wife did a very nice thing. She did this thing with his brace that he had on for a few months. She took it to this like metal artist, and had it put into a Lombardi Trophy form. Because even if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, it's going to be a magnificent accomplishment for him to say, come back again. He's comeback player of the year. He's going to be that guy. He's going to be the winner of this trophy. And obviously it matters. And to me, it's a point where, I think maybe something needed to change. And obviously, we're still not sure that if he will, be able to play in the playoffs. But he said that tomorrow's the last practice, and tomorrow's going to be a telling tale. Obviously, it's all depending on how he feels, and it'll be very interesting. Now, again, I think something changes for this offense, but I think they give the Buccaneers a run for their money. I think there's going to be a very interesting time, and I think it'll be an interesting season the rest of the way through. Now, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski tested positive, as well as 2 other personnel and a few other players, and are definitely going to be out for this week's game. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. And obviously, playoffs are going to be big, and I'll get into more about the playoffs, but we've got a lot to talk about still. There were some coaching fires being fired. Anthony Lynn was fired after winning 4 straight and finishing 7-9. I don't agree with this firing, because you had a competing quarterback, and then you see what happens with Tyrod Taylor with the pain injection puncturing his lung and losing his job that way. This could be putting Herbert in a bad spot. You look at what happened to Baker, and you look at what happened to Josh Rosen, and you look at what happened to multiple quarterbacks who have had two different coordinators each year, different head coaches each year that they've been in the league, and it doesn't work out well. it doesn't look out well for anyone. And it's going to be a very telling tale of what happens. But I think maybe this is probably the most interesting spot for a head coach, for a head coaching candidate. Eric Bieniemy could go to LA, the Chiefs offensive coordinator. He could go to LA, work with Herbert, turn him into another Mahomes, and the AFC West has got another challenging team. It's going to be interesting to just watch that team. Obviously, as I said, I don't agree with Anthony Lynn being fired. Obviously, he was building a reputation from last year and into this year of losing close games. And obviously, it didn't really help out that much. And again, it's a very telling tale about what happens. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. Because again, Herbert's a good player. I don't want Herbert to fail. And if he fails, it's going to look bad on this league. And it's not going to be a good thing. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think it'll be interesting to see. Now, again, it's going to be interesting. Now, another head coach being fired. Adam Gase. I've been saying it for weeks, and I've been saying it for months. Adam Gase needed gone. My question is, why didn't you do it when you fired Greg Williams? Obviously, Adam Gase was the issue. And he even stated that he didn't help Darnold develop. And that's an issue. That's your guy that you drafted. You drafted Sam Darnold. You drafted a guy that you thought you could trust. And you just let him down. Just like you did Ryan Tannehill. You let Ryan Tannehill down. And it was a piss poor decision. Obviously, Adam Gase needed gone. He was wasting Sam Darnold's career and wasting many careers on that team. You look at what happened with Jamal Adams. He wanted out because of Adam Gase. He said Adam Gase didn't have leadership skills. He didn't have good leadership skills. He blamed others, and when the team was getting their butts kicked, he let the other coaches talk. You need to talk to your team. Obviously, that's the issue. Your players don't want to play for you anymore. Obviously, Adam Gase was the issue. I don't think Sam Darnold's the issue. As I said, he could be the next Ryan Tannehill. Coming to a team that, comes in and plays really well to a different team and plays decent. Obviously, Adam Gase needed to be fired, and everyone knew it. He's finally done hurting this team, and it helps. Now, I don't know why, but Sam Darnold said he didn't play consistent enough to save Gase's job. I don't think he's wrong. Obviously, I don't think he's right. Adam Gase didn't develop you. Sam, you're fine. It wasn't your fault. It's Adam Gase's fault. Adam Gase is going to get another job somewhere because he knows Peyton Manning. He helped, quote unquote, helped Peyton Manning. I don't think it's going to work. And if someone sees potential in Sam Darnold, he could stay in the Jaguars go in a different direction in the draft other than a quarterback. And as I was saying, as me and Marvin was saying earlier, it's going to be very interesting to see what teams want. If they want Justin Fields or if they want Trevor Lawrence or if they want one of these three other guys. There's a guy I was going to talk about. There's a North Dakota State quarterback who's going to be a stud, I feel like. Obviously, Sam Darnold couldn't play consistent enough because he wasn't developed. He wasn't getting developed, and he's been in the league for 3 years. This year, if they take his fifth year option, they're saying he's still our guy. But if they don't, expect Sam Darnold to leave New York. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets cut him. Good old Bill over there, over a couple of states away, was like, hey, Sam, you want to come and you want to come play for a real coach? And Sam Darnold gets picked up and goes to the Patriots. It will be an interesting storyline. Another head coach being fired is Doug Marrone, and as the owner was stating, this is to help restart the franchise from scratch. They want to start from the bottom up. Obviously, not the owner, obviously, but I think everyone knows the GM got fired earlier this year, and Doug Marrone is now to follow. Obviously, the Jaguars didn't do well. They locked the number 1 seed and have a lot of good young potential talent. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The Jaguars or the Chargers are going to be an interesting team to watch. They're going to be probably 2 of the most interesting head coaching positions for head coaching candidates. And, there's a young, talented roster in Jacksonville and LA, and it's going to be very interesting, in my opinion. I think maybe this is going to be an interesting season, off season anyway, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do. Now, Jaguars, as I said, need to move on, and it was the right choice, and it was very interesting to see. Now, the Dolphins offensive coordinator Chan Gailey resigns after 1 season, and the Dolphins are looking for a new offensive coordinator for the 5th time in a row, and this is the 3rd time under Brian Flores. Flores has said, "I want to thank Chan for all his hard work and dedication in what was a unique year." Flores said in a statement, "He played an important role on the staff in the development of our young roster. I wish him all the best." And that's the best thing. They finally find an offensive coordinator, and he's resigning. Obviously, I think I read that he was gonna take a year off to evaluate retirement. But it's gonna be interesting. I think it's gonna be interesting. The next hire will need to be a coordinator who can actually probably help Tua. Tua needs to be developed easier, and he needs to be the long term there because they drafted him early. You don't want Tua to be a bust. And obviously, right now he's the 3rd best quarterback in that draft, behind Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow obviously got injured earlier in the year and didn't finish well, but it was going to be a Rookie of the Year challenge between him and Justin Herbert. But obviously Justin Jefferson obviously gave his word or his playmaking skills to be a possible contender. I think it's a very interesting thing, and obviously that's an offensive coordinating job that could be very interesting because you get a young, good player, and it's going to be interesting. Chase Young, as I said, once Tom, it'll be very interesting, and it'll be a very interesting thing. Now, we're going to talk about a bit GMs here. Obviously, there's been a lot of GM firings, but now a new one pops up, a new one that no one really expected. That is John Elway stepping down as GM as he moves into an elevated position as president of football operations. This is big. This means that maybe they're going to be held back by drafting a tall white quarterback and going after someone who's a little more athletic, in my opinion, because obviously John Elway hasn't drafted very well. He had Brock Osweiler, he's had Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch. It's just been turmoil. Drew Lock could be the case, could be like the person, but it's very hard to tell as he struggled a little bit. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And again, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. Now, I find it interesting about what happens as, we move forward into this next offseason, and it'll be very interesting to see because to me, there's going to be a lot of players in this draft that are going to be interesting. As I said, you've got the Heisman winner and Devontae Smith. You have Mac Jones. You have the BYU quarterback. You have, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. You have some stud wideouts. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of stud wideouts in this draft. It'll be very interesting to see. Now, some big stat here. Derrick Henry he got past the 2,000-yard mark and is the 8th player to do so. Derrick Henry, congrats. I want to congrats you here. What a season. All I can say is what a season. And you played really well. obviously I thought you were going to run all over the Packers, and I thought you were going to run all over most of these teams. And it was very interesting to watch you play and throw defensive backs onto their back. It was interesting. Now, as I said, the playoffs are set. Playoffs are set, and it's a very interesting time. The Saturday slate, you have Indianapolis versus Buffalo, starting on Saturday at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Then you have the LA Rams versus Seattle Seahawks at 4:40 Eastern Time. And then, prime time. As I said, this could be a very good game. You have Tampa Bay versus Washington. And that's going to be a very interesting game. And that game is at prime time at 7:15 Eastern. Now, or 8:15 Eastern, my bad. Now, Sunday slate, I'm going to give my predictions here after I get all through the slates here. The Sunday slate, you have Baltimore versus Tennessee at, 1:05 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. And then the game that's probably going to be a snooze fest because New Orleans probably going to body them is the Bears versus New Orleans at 4:40 on Sunday, or Eastern Time on Sunday. And as I said, I don't think the Chicago Bears have a chance. And it's going to be very interesting. Now, the primetime game, which is a very interesting primetime game, as Cleveland's having a COVID outbreak, and it's insane. And I'm surprised this game's not postponed yet. Cleveland versus Pittsburgh at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. In prime time, we get Cleveland versus Pittsburgh. Now, it's going to be an interesting season, as I said, and an interesting playoffs. I have the Bills obviously rolling over the Colts. And this is the only game I do not have a winner. I just can't decide. It's the Rams versus Seahawks. The Rams and Seahawks split this season. And obviously it's going to be an interesting time. Because again, you look at this and you're like, oh, both these teams are really good. Obviously the Rams won the division, or the Seahawks won the division, but the Rams are right behind them. And obviously they played really well to get here. And it's going to be interesting. Now, I'm actually going to give an upset in this next game, in the Bucs-Washington game. I'm giving it to Washington. As I said, Washington could give Tampa a run for the money. And it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see, and I think it'll be interesting to watch. Now, the Sunday slate of games, I have the Ravens beating the Titans. Obviously, as Marvin was saying, this team could give... The Titans could give the Ravens all they can handle, and it'll be very interesting to see with Derrick Henry running the football. And I said it before, Saints are going to roll over the Bears. Now, I was struggling with this one. I want Cleveland to win, obviously, because this is the first time in 18 years they make playoffs. As I said, or as I've been wanting to say, Cleveland has been what they need to be. Cleveland showed, we're a team now. Also, we made the playoffs for the first time since 2002. I was 2 at the time that they made the playoff. 2 at the time they made playoffs. And obviously, it's going to probably end very early. But they have a lot of good players on that team, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Now, I'm going to talk about a little bit stat leaders here. The leader in passing yards is Deshaun Watson with 4,823, and this is without DeAndre Hopkins, which is very interesting. For passing touchdowns, it's Aaron Rodgers with 48, and he had a great season, and it was a fantastic year for him. He's going to go down in record books because it's probably one of the best. Passing completion percentage goes as well to Aaron Rodgers with 70.7. That is insane. Aaron Rodgers played an outstanding football. Derrick Henry had obviously, as I said, 2,027 passing or rushing yards. For receiving yards, it's Stephon Diggs, and that's interesting because he changed teams. People didn't really think he was going to do well when he changed, and it was very interesting to see. For receiving touchdowns, I've got to pull it up here. This is one I forgot to write down. It was also, one second here, Davante Adams with 18, and he missed 2.5 games. Davante Adams had 18 touchdowns and missed 2.5 games. He was also only about 200 yards behind, or just under 250 yards away, or 150 yards behind Stephon Diggs. 2.5 games. Man, what would have changed there? I think Devontae Adams could have had the receiving yards. For sacks, it's TJ Watt with 15 interceptions. It's Xavier Howard from Miami with 10 interceptions. It's been a while since a guy who had double-digit interceptions. And it's been a very interesting season as we get moving to the playoffs. But before we move into the playoffs, there's one big troublemaker here. And that is Raiders running back Josh Jacobs. He was arrested with a DUI, and as well as, I'm pretty sure I saw it was like drag racing or whatever. And this was a big no-no. It's going to be a very interesting time to see what happens with this. Obviously, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him. I feel like he's obviously going to get suspended, but it's also going to be very interesting to see what he does. And so it's going to be interesting to see what this team does. Well, thanks for listening. And go check out Marvin and CTI interview room on YouTube or Facebook, or CTS, my bad, CTS interview room on Facebook and everything, and check his website out and everything that you can. This has been Christian Guys, and this has been Sports Spot. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys next time.